खेलने आ रहा हूँ।
बंद है,
बंद है।
कोशिश करना नीचे से होगी। वाइड है। इसके नीचे से जाओगे, इसके आई लेवल पे देख। See, the other option is that I will compose just this. Yeah, but this would be like whole white frame. People are walking. People are
take a call that way.
हाँ तो ये भी तो चाहिए। हाँ ये सही तो है, ये बढ़िया है, लेकिन इसमें इसकी फुल की कोई ज़रूरत नहीं है। पढ़ रहा हूँ मेरे। हाँ ठीक है, अच्छा तो सही है। एप्लीकेशन प्रॉब्लम। हाँ ये सब डिलीट कर देना पहले। हाँ मतलब जो बाकी टेस्ट के लिए वो सब डिलीट कर देना। वो सब डिलीट कर देना।
कंप्लीट हो जाएगा फिर अप्रैल
सोचना क्या है?
Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for joining us today. We have gathered here to talk about the importance of mental well-being and to understand how we can take care of both ourselves and others around us at the workplace and beyond. I'm pleased to welcome our guest for today, Aparna Piramal. Aparna is a writer, columnist, public speaker, educator, and author of the recently released Chemical Khichdi, How I Hacked My Mental Health, a book on her experiences of living with a serious mental health condition over the last 2 decades. Her popular column, Head Office, in the Mint newspaper, looks at leadership through the unique lens of workspace design and management work styles. Over 100 CEOs from India and globally have been featured in head office. This column actually led her to the first book, Working Out of the Box, 40 Stories of Leading CEOs. She has also previously contributed to the UK's Financial Times Weekends, a leading global newspaper. A visiting faculty member at the Anant National University in Ahmedabad, she actually teaches a module called Netflix and the Art of Design Writing. Aparna speaks regularly on design, leadership, business, and mental health in various forums, including industry associations, business schools, and eminent organizations. Former CEO of BP Ergo, one of India's largest modular office furniture companies, Aparna studied politics, philosophy, and economics at Oxford University, post which she earned an MBA from the Harvard Business School. She invites all of you to connect with her on social media, which we'll be sharing after this session. On behalf of Bajaj Auto, we would like to give you a memento. May I please invite onto the stage our Vice President of R&D, Mr. Sendil Mani, as well as Aparna, please. Thank you both. With this, I hand the stage over to you, ma'am.
Just give me a minute while I load the presentation. I must say, being the one person in white in a sea of black is a new experience for me. Yeah, thank you all for having me here. It's really a privilege to be at Bajaj Auto. You know, I have known the family for a long time, and I've been coming to this plant for a really long time, but to engage with you and work like this is really an honor. And I know it's Friday afternoon, and it's after lunch, and I'm the talk on mental health seems so heavy between you and the weekend, so I'm going to try and keep it as interactive as possible. So let's just start with a very small quiz. All you need to do is raise your hand. There's no penalties for the right or wrong answer. So I'm going to ask you, how many of you know someone in your inner circle who was diagnosed with cancer and who was quite open about it? Can you just raise your hand? So quite a few hands go up. Now, how many of you would know somebody who was diagnosed with a mental health condition and was open about it in your immediate circle? A few, a little more, a little less, but a few. So the fact actually is that mental health you're more likely to have a mental health condition in India than you are to get cancer. But we talk about cancer a lot more than we do mental health. I know we have been doing some talks at Bajaj Auto about mental health, but the fact is for generally in the country, the situation is that cancer is much spoken about much more. Now, in my own family, I've lost my uncle to cancer. I've also had somebody who's taken their own life, but we are more cognizant of the person who died to cancer. And cancer is very serious, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying that mental health is something that we don't talk about. So it's a little bit like saying, a few years ago, we all did these tests on vitamin D. And we said that, we're all deficient as a nation in sunlight. And that's why we need sunlight for vitamin D, and we need to address it. And that is the sunlight that mental health also needs. Okay, that is why I'm here today to talk about it. bipolar disorder, which means that it takes me very high, which is known as being manic, and I'll talk about it in more detail. It also takes me very low, which is being depressed. But when I'm manic, these are the words that you could actually use to describe me. But these are also the words that you could use to describe me. As they just read out in the introduction, I am a mother, I'm a writer, I'm a professor, I've been a CEO, I've studied at all these institutions. So really, the myth that I really want to bust, before we get to that, I'll just show you pictures of my previous life. This was me at our family business, a manufacturing company, they called office furniture company called Utsah. We were the first company in India to take part in an exhibition globally, and we did a lot of different things for our time, which was about 20 years ago. So it just shows, the ability to take on leadership at a fairly young age because I had this family business. Today I've been writing columns. This is the column that you see on the right is the 100th column I did for the Mint. I've been with them for 14 years. The book that you see on the left is something that I published a few years ago. Rajiv sir's interview is also in that book. And I teach at a university. These are some of the students I teach. So the myth that I really want to bust is that you could actually have a mental health condition which is serious and still live a normal life.
Some said children were out of the question, but here I am, a mother of 2 boys. Some said I couldn't handle business life, while I interviewed over 100 CEOs and counting. Some said I wouldn't be able to write a book on mental health, but here it is, available wherever books are sold. I'm Aparna Piramal, and I'm happy, thriving, and bipolar. I'm here to say that you can live with a mental health condition, even something as serious as bipolar disorder, which takes you very high and very low, and learn to thrive with it. Read Chemical Kitchen and find out how I hacked my mental health, and perhaps how you or someone you know can also hack your mental health. Join me in a conversation on a subject that affects all of us.
So really I want to say this, that you can have a serious mental health condition and live this normal life. So let me tell you a little bit about what bipolar is like. Okay, so effectively there are chemical imbalances that happen in the brain due to certain triggers. And when these imbalances happen, my energy levels are really high. It's very difficult for people to keep up with me. I've got lots of ideas. I don't have control over my thoughts and emotions. Usually what I like to do is do a lot of writing at that time, so I might write as many as like 50 pages in 5 days, which is much more than normal. And then I go so high that I eventually kind of crash. And I get into this mode of being depressed. Anybody over here, just for me to see, did have an understanding of bipolar before this, or have read anything about bipolar before this? A little bit. Yeah, so it's a pretty serious mental health condition. Like, it's in the same category of mental health conditions like schizophrenia, okay? And we often think of schizophrenia as something that's very, very serious. And I've had these voices in my head, I've had these delusions, I've had these hallucinations, but today, here I am today giving a talk about it, right? So we'll talk about the implications of that. So the myth I really want to say is that you can have a mental health condition, whether it's anxiety, depression, ADHD, or whatever that you're dealing with. And the fact is that statistically, 1 out of 5 or 6 or 7 Indians are likely to have that. So today, if Bajaj Auto employs over 10,000 people, it's quite likely that, at least 2,000 of those people might be dealing with something that either they themselves have not diagnosed or the company doesn't know about, right? And it ultimately affects all of us in different ways. So you might ask, why am I doing this? Why am I actually putting my life, so bare and so transparently? You'll get a copy of the book and you can see that I've shared a lot about my life. Because I'll just share this one message I got from somebody who read my book at 5:45 in the morning. And he said, Aparna, I just can't stop reading your book. And this is somebody I hadn't even met, we just exchanged some emails. He said, I can't stop reading your book. I'm going to give it to somebody who's going through a personal trauma beyond explanation. I am going to give it to a friend who's lost her mother and is going through a lot of anxiety. I'm going to give it to somebody who's written a book about depression. And I'm going to apologize to my wife who was dealing with postpartum depression, and I took it very lightly. So the fact is, it's all around us, right? And I think it was just absolutely amazing that he could resonate with it. And that's why I'm really here to share the story and to see and to hope that it resonates with you also. So the book is about bipolar, which is only 1% of people, but the actual book is about mental wellness, which is for everyone. Okay, so I think all of us want to improve our mental well-being and improving our mental health. So even today, if you don't have a particular mental health condition that you're dealing with, I think you'll find something that's relevant in it today.
Hi,
Okay, so I'm going to tell you a story about what this is all like in real life for me, okay? So I had dinner with a friend of mine, and she's an old school friend, and she told me, Aparna, my son sees movies in his head. Now her son is a teenager, and he's an autistic. And she said, he sees these movies. And you know, honestly, my face just lit up because I said, finally, there's someone like me who also sees these movies in the head. And actually, you know, bipolar and autism are different, but they're both neurodiverse conditions. So there's maybe some similarities. So then, so I asked her, so what are these movies like? And she said, well, there are lots of animals in them, and then everyone usually dies at the end. And I said, okay, this is not very different. There are no animals in my movies, but there's a lot of, there's everything from action to drama to even comedy at times, but there's also been a lot of sexual violence, there's been trauma, and there's been times when it's been really difficult. And the fact is, you know, when I've got these movies going on inside my head, I can't pay attention to anybody else. You know what it's like being in a cinema and eating food, and you don't want the waiter coming up to you and saying, you know, come on, here is your samosa, whatever it is. Now imagine if I'm totally caught up in my movies and the imagery and the soundtracks, and I'm full, you know, just paying attention to those. Now somebody taps you on the head and says, have you taken your medication? Have you slept? How much have you slept? I know they're doing this out of concern, but actually, for me, it's very difficult to deal with, right? And I can't pay attention to what's going on outside. So this is what the movies are like for me. So then my friend asked me, now what do you do with these movies? What do I tell my son to get him to stop watching the movies in the head? So I said, ask him, whose hand is that remote control in for the movie? Is it in his hand or is it in somebody else's hand? So can he actually have control over them, or is somebody else doing that for him? And that's exactly what my mentor said to me, one of my writing mentors. He said, you know, he made me sit down, and I had sent him 50 pages of writing in 5 days. And he said, Aparna, do you want to live in your head, or do you want to live in the real world? Right? What do you want? Do you want to continuously stop watching these movies, or do you want to live in the real world? And I was so numb and dejected when he said this. I was so depressed because after these manic episodes, you're always so down, but I was still listening to him. So I want to just share a few pictures, which I haven't shared very often, about what it's actually like, what I look like when this happens. So this is a picture of me with my sister when I was last manic. This was 4 years ago. And you have to look really closely at it. If you look at it, you'll see that I'm really tired. My face is strained. I'm struggling, basically. There's a struggle going inside. And I'm actually not very happy. It's not a picture of somebody who's very happy or who's totally in control of the situation. And to be honest, I don't even know when this picture was taken. I don't remember it being taken. So this is my state when I was kind of really manic. And this is actually a picture of me when I'm depressed. And I think it's an interesting picture because, you know, when we think of depression, we think of being in bed, not being able to get out of bed, having really low motivation. And I think those are also important. That is what happens to a lot of us. But for me, I get particularly quiet and withdrawn. And I still have to do my job as a mother. This is a while ago, my children were still young. I'm still with them, I'm around them, but I'm in my own world. And I think it's important for people to realize this because, you know, you could have a colleague at work who's quiet, who's withdrawn, who's not actually paying attention, as involved as they would be normally. And you might want to just ask them, you know, is something going on? Is there something I can help you with? Because that colleague is not then working to their full potential. That colleague is not fulfilling what they could do and how they could contribute, apart from it being a human issue as well. You know, so I think it's a really important aspect to understand that depression can also have different nuances to it, and it's important to keep a lookout for different signs. But this is my normal personality, okay? And that's what I'm trying to say, that there's a difference between the illness and the personality. This was a picture taken just before, around the time I was diagnosed, or just before that, about 20 years ago when I was studying at business school. And this is my normal personality of being a little bit vibrant, being a little hatke, wearing these yellow sunglasses. And this is me today. You know, I'm always posing, hoping that some fashion magazine will come and take a picture of me. So this is just recently. So the point is, how did this transition happen, right? From the picture that you saw, the first picture that you saw, and to today. How did it actually happen? So I call them the 7 therapies. This is what has worked for me, and this is what I hope will work for other people. I would like to say that these therapies are not something that if somebody has prescribed to me, but it's something that I have developed over a period of time. I have had psychiatrists read the book, top psychiatrists in the US, in the UK, in India. They have read the book and they have said that this is all, you know, very sound advice, but it is not medical advice, okay? At the end of the day, you have to go to a mental health professional and get that advice. I need to say that. What it really is an invitation for you to think about what could work for you, could work for your family and for your loved ones. Okay, so the 3 essential therapies to survive for me is first medical therapies, and which is the role of drugs and the role of psychotherapy. The second is love therapy, which is the role of the caregivers, whether that's your family or anyone else in your life. And the third is lifestyle. So I'll give you an example of how these 3 are related, okay? Just a couple of weeks ago, I had this like mega book launch in Mumbai, and there were about 600 people there, and I was getting really stressed about, you know, how it's all going to work out, anxious, excited, everything. So I said, you know what, this could easily, ironically, turn into a trigger for me if I don't take care of it. So I spent a lot of time with my family and the dog, which is the love therapy part. I tried to avoid IPL as much as possible, which was the best thing I could do for my mental health. I then took an extra session of therapy with my therapist. I took some extra drugs which have been prescribed to me by my doctor, and you know, I went for a workout every single day. So I made that a priority, which had been slipping. So it's how these 3 kind of come together that is really important, and I'll just talk about them in a little more detail. Now, medication, I know, is a very controversial subject here in Bajaj Auto, okay, when you have certain people who are into homeopathy. But I think the point I would like to say is that in my condition, for a psychiatric illness, I think taking medication has really been important. It has stabilized me. It has given me a security and a safety net when things are bad. And I think, you know, it's so normal for me to say, I take an antipsychotic, I go to a psychiatrist, I go to a therapist, and this is what helps me remain stable and remain happy and healthy. Like for me, that stigma just doesn't exist in my mind. The other part that's really important is talk therapy. I think the 2 really go hand in hand, because the way I look at my condition is that it's psychological triggers that lead to lack of sleep, and lack of sleep leads to a chemical imbalance. So there's a psychology side, and then there is the chemical imbalance. So it's really important to have someone to talk to. I know you have all these options available at the company that the company has provided. There are obviously options outside the company too. So it's really important. And you know, what it's allowed me to do is to actually make this statement that I'm not living with an illness as much as I'm living with a vulnerability. Okay, and that vulnerability means that personality and illness are 2 different things. And somewhere down the line, you actually learn to love both of them, you know, and you actually come and make peace with both of them. So that's one. The second part is mental health is a team sport. That's very much a motto for me. I think that for my family, there have been so many people looking after me. That's a picture of my team at Christmas. So a few of them, and especially my mother, my sister, and my husband have been a really, really big part of this team for me. And I actually, a friend of mine actually said this: when you think of mental wellness, let's not think of it as illness, but let's think of it as a garden that you attend to every day, right? Something like joint pain or something like diabetes also, you can say, okay, I'll look at it next week, but mental health and wellness, you really have to look at it every day. And by every day, I mean sleep, exercise, nutrition, and also play. Play is really important to do. And it's so great that we're doing this in this multi-purpose hall, and Bajaj has all these facilities where you can go rock climbing and you can play table tennis and do all of these things. I really hope you are doing that, because I think that's so much part of our well-being, and really encourage that. Okay, so these are the things that you need to survive. Unfortunately, a lot of families and most of the calls that I get from people, they're just struggling with the survival part. But if you can actually tackle those and get past those, then these are actually the therapies that have allowed me to thrive. So I'll go through them one by one. Allies and the therapy of empathy. Okay, so this is the idea that you have these allies in your life which are different from your family members. They could be your friends, they could be the mentor that I talked about, they could be a network of people like a writing club or a book club for me, or somebody you meet in a yoga class. They're people who are a little bit distinct from the rest of your world. They have a huge role to play because I think that they can give you that empathy that is really needed. I say that if it takes a village to raise a child, it really takes a community to heal a mind. And I think that all of us can be allies to people around us, wherever they are. So, the allies for me do this, right? They help me fight this war. And if it takes some amount of friendship, if it takes a lot to be a friend, it takes a hell of a lot of friendship to be an ally. These are some of my just examples of really close friends from, being there at birthday parties. Oh, these friends I really want to talk about, because some of these are what I call the daily download friends. So I have this concept of these friends who I'm in touch with pretty much every day or every 2-3 days. And we don't talk about necessarily the big issues in life, but we just talk about our day. Oh, I'm coming to Bajaj Auto to give a presentation, and I'm super excited about it, or whatever, and that sort of thing. And they will ask, how did it go? And we just stay in touch all the time. They're in sync. And these daily download friends are really what help me maintain that equilibrium, because you cannot expect your family to do everything. So, these friends have really been there for me. A little thing that one of my friends, Upasna, did, which are small things that your friends do that you remember. I had just emailed the manuscript for the book to my editor, and I went off to get something, and I was doing it in Soho House where I work. And I went off, and she wrote this on a piece of paper, and she said, Aparna, you've done it. You wanted to do this for such a long time, but you've actually done it. And I've saved that piece of paper. We took a photo, and this is how I think. This is what mental health is for me. This is what mental wellness is for me. Being able to do these little things for your friends that you always remember. And this is my book club where we meet, and this is where my idea for my book actually happened. When I shared my rough draft with them, and they said, yes, this could turn into a book, and you must do this. And it was as long as 7 years ago that I had the idea of doing it, but this group of people have always been encouraging me to fulfill that. Now, work therapy, okay. I wonder if people think that work can be therapeutic. How many people think work can be therapeutic? And how many people think work can be stressful? No one? Okay, some. How many people think work is going to be therapeutic? About the same. Okay, you're being very politically correct here. So I am going to read you something. Just give me a minute. So I am going to read you a little excerpt from my book about work, okay? And because we are in a workplace context, I really want to spend a little bit of time on this. January 2012, a factory outside Chandigarh. My colleague and I are traveling to the family's office furniture factory outside Chandigarh. Thoughts are buzzing in my head like irritating bees, so much so that I need to rush to the privacy of my hotel room and spit them out into my voice recorder before I even make it to the factory. I am back in the family business, looking after marketing and trying to turn it around. My mother is keen to sell the business, and a family friend wanted my help to improve its valuation. But the landscape has completely changed since my previous tenure. My former colleagues have left, margins have dwindled, and the world has had an economic meltdown. I am trying to combine family life with a toddler and an infant, with freelance writing and a business turnaround. It is a lot to take on, and sleep slips away. So my mind responds in the only way it knows: it rebels. I remember this manic episode vividly. Mania ascended with frightening familiarity. The physical symptoms were immediate indicators: a wired body, struggling to sleep for more than a few hours, and the constant adrenaline. It is always physically grueling. And that's when the words and thoughts started emerging. First, like butterflies released from a net, light and delicate, but ending up like a dagger plunged into one's back, brutal, bloodied, and relentless. So you can see work was difficult, okay? Work was really difficult. But yet I'm saying that work can be therapeutic. So why did I say that? So let me tell you the rest of the story. So what happened was, after this incident, my family actually got together and said, Aparna, you're not cut out to work in the family business, and you have to leave. And this was devastating, okay? I mean, can you imagine if somebody just told Rajiv Bajaj, you can't make motorbikes anymore in your life, and you've got to figure out something else to do? I think you can imagine how shattering it was. So I had to then figure out something to do, and I turned to journalism. And because I liked writing always, and I wanted to prove myself, I then took on this other huge assignment in journalism, which was equally stressful. And then I got equally stressed doing that. And then I had another kind of manic episode. So I ended up back in the same place. But eventually, I was in such a bad state, I had to tell my bosses I was bipolar. Okay, so I went to see my immediate boss, a lady called Seema Chaudhary. And I said, listen, I'm sorry I've not been doing the deadlines. I have to meet you. It's because I'm bipolar. I'm not able to finish the deadlines the way you want. And luckily, she was very accommodating. Okay, she didn't know what it meant, but she looked it up. We were working remotely, so she didn't fully have a handle on it. We spoke on the phone, but she was very accommodating, and she gave me that second chance that I needed. Similarly, I had a conversation with the head of the newspaper that I was writing for, the editor-in-chief, Sukumar. He also gave me a second chance. So what I'm trying to say is that you will get those second chances if you need them. I think you need to, I think workplaces that are diverse, are inclusive, will give employees a second chance, but the employees need to tell them what they're going through. It's really, really important for that to happen. And I think that, there has to be the right fit. I think working probably in the family business wasn't the right fit for me, but working for a newspaper has been, because it's been 14 years now that I've been writing for the Mint. I've written really interesting columns for them, as they themselves say. We've gone on to publish a book. And now I'm also teaching. As soon as I started teaching, the first thing, I pretty much told him bipolarity is part of my resume now. So, you either hire me and you hire my bipolarity. So he was pretty okay with it. And I think everybody I work with now knows that. So it's just a question of being that open. So I think what I would really say is that this courage is a marathon that starts with trust. It's been a long journey for me to actually tell people that I'm bipolar. When I first got diagnosed, I didn't even want to tell my dentist or my dermatologist, put it on the form that I'm taking lithium. But now I'm at a stage where I'm, able to give this talk to you, right? So it's been that marathon journey. But that journey starts with trust, and the workplace is where the trust is the most important. Because you're anyway telling your friends, you're telling your family members, and whether or not they accept it, some families do, some families don't, but you're telling them in any case what's going on. So I think it's really important to actually once you can tell your colleagues about it and they are okay with it, then you can actually go on to do many more things. So the workplace conversation was a really important one. Then the self-therapy, the conversations with self. Okay, this is really, really important, is to understand the triggers of why do those movies get into the head in the first place, right? Why are we all sitting there, and why am I imagining these movies and not living in the real world? So I've been actually journaling for a very long time, and these, and I've been maintaining a journal for the last 10 years. And I think I've been pretty honest with myself in that journal. And when you start being pretty honest, no one looks at it, no one else ever reads it. It's just for me. And it's just for me to reflect on myself, to reflect on what's going on with my life. You don't have to write every day, but it's really a way to understand what you're going through. So I'll show you one of the entries. There are many more in the book. But this is something I wrote 10 years ago when I was making that switch from business into journalism. And I said that, the road ahead is very open, but it's terrifying, but it's also exciting. It's both these things. I was pretty honest with myself. And now if I go back to look at it, 10 years ago, I wanted to win all that peer respect. But now, where am I? Like, I'm in a... I'm in a place where I am getting the peer respect, but I've actually moved beyond that because I've discovered purpose. I've looked at success. I've looked at happiness. I've looked at fulfillment. I've looked at to try and understand what these things mean to all of us. And beyond doing a job, even in a well-paying job, even in an exciting company like Auto, I think there's, some things that we ask ourselves about what is most meaningful for us. So this is what the journaling and the conversations with myself have really helped me do that. Now, spiritual therapy can be really life-changing. I would love you to discover this for yourself in the book, because I don't want to talk too much about this, because I think everybody has, some people are believers, some people are not. But I will say there was one shlok of the Bhagavad Gita that changed my life, and it's in chapter 8 of my book, not chapter 8 of the Bhagavad Gita, but it's about dharma. And so, I'm a professor, so I always like to give a little bit of homework. So you can go and look it up and see if it's something that would work for you. But I think spiritual therapy has taught me a lot about gratitude, mindfulness, detachment, things that I think are helpful to all of us in our life, whether or not we choose to be a person of faith or not. So finally, I would say I have an illness, but I am not unwell. I have a condition, it's not a disorder. A disorder to me suggests that there's some malfunction of some sort, but this is just a condition that I live with, and I have to learn to live and thrive with it. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a few closing points. If mental health is a team sport, whose team are you on, and who is on your team? Ask yourself that question. If you take one thing away from today's talk, take that away. The other point I'll say is that this, talk, you might think 7 therapies, I'm struggling just with medication and diagnosis. It's very easy for Aparna, with all her resources, to stand up here and say that, you must have these 7 therapies. I'm not saying that you have to have 7. These are some things that have worked for me. There could be some that could work for you, some couldn't. And the context of it could change. Okay, if there's a woman in rural Rajasthan who has depression, then I think she would have a different set of context. But she would still need the role of medication. She would still need someone to talk to. She would need family. She might need spirituality. She would need the role of the community. So the context might vary, but I think all of this would remain the same. And I would just want you to say that, we all have vulnerabilities, but we don't need to be victims. That's really important for me. Whatever vulnerability we have, we might have a business issue, relationship issue, something with our parents, something at work, any weaknesses that we have. We don't need to be victims of that, because I think ultimately it is resilience that counts. Some people see Chemical Khichdi as an act of courage, but really I see it as a story of resilience and vulnerability and learning to live with it. So the last thing I'll say is that, Auto is a very special company for me. I don't know why, for some reason, I have this bike in my cabin, okay? I think I got it in my cabin because my children were young and they used to come to the office, and I thought they might like to play with it. They ended up playing with Lego, of course, but they didn't, so the package remained unopened. So I still have it. So it's just to say that this is a very special company for me. I wouldn't normally share my email with anyone, but if you want to, in utmost confidentiality, email me about anything that's going on inside your life, please do so, and I will respond to you. Thank you very much. I think we have some Q&A, no?
mic can go over here. So thank you, Aparna. Prior to today's session, we collected a few questions from our employees in the plant as well as our regional offices across India. So if you're okay, we could go ahead and address some of them. So this is a question coming from our employees saying, I have mood swings. How do I know if I am bipolar?
Yeah, so I think that, you know, a lot of people have mood swings, and I think it's very easy to think, oh, how I might be bipolar. Even, I mean, hopefully everybody over here has lots of ideas, okay? And everybody over here has a bad day now and then. So I think that, you know, it's easy to understand. I think the thing with bipolar is that it may be extreme. Okay, that like these mood swings may be more extreme. They go on for a few days. They go on for a few weeks. So it's not something that just lasts for just a day or so, or just a few days also. So they have to go on for a particular length of time, and they have to be much more extreme than your normal behavior. So there are particular symptoms also that I've identified in the book, and of course you can get them on Wikipedia, or not Wikipedia is probably not the best example, but on other medical websites. But it's just important to keep that distinction in mind.
Okay. Another question is, I come from a family where if I'm feeling low or down, the standard response is shake it off. How do I respond to that?
I think one response is a very, I think, standard question, because we are so used to being stoic and, you know, pragmatic maybe, is that it's like telling somebody with a broken leg that suddenly start walking, you know, and to just explain to them that just because there's things going on in the mind, it's, you know, it's equivalent to asking somebody to do something which they are physically incapable of, like a broken leg, and to just explain that. And to explain what it feels like, to explain that in more detail, what it feels like in terms of motivation or energy levels or appetite or any other, in terms of self-esteem, to be able to articulate that and to explain that. The other thing that you could also do is to take the help of a mental health professional and take your family member along with them for them to understand what this issue is all about.
Okay. The other question that came up is, I have been taking counseling for about 4 to 5 years now, but every time there is a series of assignments and tasks given as part of the counseling. So it becomes quite overwhelming to finish them, and I end up discontinuing. So how do I overcome this?
Yeah, I think if a counselor is asking you to do too much homework, I would go to a different counselor, honestly. Like, I don't think a counselor should be asking you to do too many tasks and overburdening with you. So that's my personal opinion. It's always worth it to maybe have a second opinion and see if that matters, you know.
Okay. So any questions from the audience? We can take.
Yeah.
Hi, Aparna. It's quite inspiring to see how you managed to reach to such a good place with a condition lying with you. My name is Pranay. I'm curious that if on a given day you have such a session, you have to deliver a speech, and in the morning when you wake up, you are in the lows of your mood, how do you cope up?
Yeah, through my daily download friends. I mean, I'm telling you, I had to do a talk, one of my first talks actually for my book. I was so excited about it. All my friends were going to come, and then my son told me he didn't get selected in the cricket selection that he wanted to, okay, which was devastating for him and even more devastating for me. I was practically in tears that time. And I said, how am I going to do this talk now? I have to do it. So I texted my friend and I said, you know, I'm feeling like so low about his cricket selection, which really I shouldn't have. I was, you know, but that's how one overreacts, I guess. Gets too emotional. And she just kind of cheered me up, and she said, no, of course you'll be fine. And it was fine. It was all okay. So I think for me, really, these friends work as a mood stabilizer, you know. If I didn't have these friends, I would probably be on more of a mood stabilizer than I am. And I think it's not just that they are doing it for me to keep me stable, I also do it for them, right? I mean, the one thing I didn't mention in the talk, which I should mention, is I'm also a primary caregiver of my family, right? I have 2 children, and then there are other people in my parents, etc., that I look after, and, you know, other friends in my life, somebody who has depression. And so we are all caregivers, we are all receiving and we are giving at the same time. That's, you know, so just to being conscious of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for being here. I wanted to know one thing, whether it is the condition in itself, like you are feeling low or you are feeling high is one thing. Is that the problem? Or is the reaction of the onlooker a problem? If I accept you as you are, or I am accepted by people as I am, does it still remain such a big problem?
I
Is
think,
it-
yeah, I know where you're coming from. I think, like I said, the people around me have been very accepting. But the thing is, when I am manic or even when I'm getting psychotic, there is a problem. Like, I'm just not able to focus on anything. I'm not sleeping. Energy levels are at a different level. Like, I'm just super energetic. My mind is going off in all different directions. I'm not in control, essentially. And I think to be not in control of your own mind is a very scary place to be, because it just degenerates and it deteriorates. So one has to put those red flags in place to make sure that you don't go beyond a point. There are times when you can be very creative also, but if if you just continue along that path, it becomes too much. So I think it's not the problem so much of the onlooker. They are trying to take care of the situation. I just think the situation itself is a serious situation.
Because I've seen some cases wherein if the individual is left unto himself, or you remain in silence for some time, the bodily functions evolve in such a fashion to, in a direction to correct the situation.
Yeah, I mean, if people can get a hold of themselves, that's good. That's definitely good. But I found, at least in my experience, that it definitely helps to have someone tell you that there's some red flags, or that I myself can tell myself there's some red flags, which is what happens more often these days. So. But yes, what you certainly don't need is people judging you. I agree with you there. Like, you definitely don't need that. Yeah. Hi.
Hello. So how do I get to know that I'm suffering from mental health? Because sometimes I feel perturbed or dejected, but it can be a momentary thing because of something that happened to me for some point of time. I feel like that way. But is it a prolonged mental situation that I'm going through, or it is just a momentary thing? So how can I distinguish between these two aspects? Whether it's a serious medical problem that I'm undergoing with, or it is just a thing that has happened for that point of time only.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that question. I think that we all go through these ups and downs, and I think that if it's happening too often, if people around you are commenting, this is not your normal self, you're not, this is not who you used to be, you become so quiet, or your behavior is different. These are probably more signals that you're going through a prolonged phase. And it never hurts to just have one counseling session or a therapy session or something, just to kind of get a sense of where you are. Like, there's nothing, they're only there to help you. If you feel that there's something that you're really going through in your life that you need to discuss with somebody, it's always helpful, because a friend is also different from a therapist. So it depends how of frequency it's happening, the frequency and the intensity, both. If the frequency is more, the intensity is more, then it's maybe time to, see someone. Hi.
The talk. My question is kind of related to what he had to ask. From the onlooker's perspective, how do you broach the topic of mental health with somebody who you think has a condition without being too offensive or intrusive in that sense?
Yeah, I think, rather than saying that rather than being any kind of judgment call, like you're looking like this, or you're looking down, or you're not looking like yourself, or something like that, you'd probably just say that, can I discuss something with you? To me, it seems that maybe you had a bad day. Start with like a gentler approach, a more empathetic approach, and then see where it goes on. Is there something you would like to discuss with me? Start with like a more open-ended, gentler approach, which could not necessarily imply that that person has a mental health condition, right? It could just get them to talk about whatever they're going through without saying a mental health condition, you know. Just to give you an example, let's say you went to a village and you say, are you depressed? They've not used the word, what is the Hindi word for depression also, I'm not sure. But they will probably not use the word depression. But they say, do you have financial difficulties? Oh yes, I do, you know. So maybe kind of go through that approach of saying that, is this troubling you, or has this been on your mind, or is this something that's going? Then you could get to like, do you think you might want to talk to someone about it? Would you find it helpful? Can I come with you? Or, just approach it like through a more lateral approach is what I would suggest.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. I'll just look at it from this point of view as you're a mother and there are children. Now, in case of a pet, it's different. If the pet comes, he's happy with you, wags his tail, any which way you come, you're angry, you're happy, you're sad, you're whatever. But in case of children, they're looking up to you, you're the caregiver and you're everything for them. Now here, the child finds that the parent is, gone off the track, or maybe she lost it. So how does the child come to terms with it? And how would, say, your husband or your mother or your other persons around you, how would they look at looking after your children at that particular time? Because they are in a very creative and formative stage of their lives. So whatever impression you are going to make as a mother is going to last with them for the rest of their lives. And you are the central figure for them.
Yeah.
So the area which I want to touch upon here is that how would the children be looked after at a time like this?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question as to, how do you be a parent and a mother having a serious mental health condition. So I think I have two boys, they're 14 and 11. The 14-year-old is very empathetic and very intuitive. Like, I think even when he was 9 years old, he would ask me questions like, why are you so silent, mama? Or why are your eyes so red? He would notice these things. He notices my body language immediately, and he can comment on it. So he's very quick to pick up if something goes wrong. And the younger one is younger, and things, not so many ups and downs have happened during his time. I think to answer your question, how did we manage all this, is that first, my husband was quite careful to shield them from my ups and downs. So I used to move to my mother's place and stay with my mother or my sister when I was really going through a manic phase. The children would have to kind of figure out like why she's away for like a week or 2 weeks or something, they would kind of get used to that. But I would have a support system in place at home. My in-laws live with us also now. So, they did have that support system. And I think where it has left them actually is that they are very now aware of mental health. If you read my son's interview in the book, he's probably given, just me saying it as my son, of course, but he's given the wisest interview that anybody has given in the book, in terms of how one should handle a mental health condition. So I think that they're very aware of it, they're sensitive to it. They ask me questions like, could they inherit it also? And I have to, give a good response to them because it is a genetically, or it's not genetic, but, well, I don't know if it's genetic, but it's a hereditary kind of condition also. So, we tackle all these issues quite openly and they see it. I think the answer is just that there's no way of hiding it. There's absolutely no way of hiding it from children. As much as possible, you kind of shield them because we've had this system in place of, my mother and my sister have been around. And then they've kind of, they see the changes day to day. And I think the last thing I want is for them to become my caregivers. So I definitely don't want that happening at all, which I think luckily we're not in a place where that is going to happen.
Hi Aparna, so there are people also watching from the Zoom link.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So there's a question that has come up. So someone is asking like, how does these mood swings, high and lows, and depression comes back always with a trigger.
How do they come back?
Yes.
Yeah, so the triggers can be different triggers. They could be interpersonal issues, they could be issues related to work, they could be issues related to some psychological issues like identity crisis, which is for what happened to me, for example. There could be, financial problems, there could be any triggers that are affecting you mentally and psychologically. And then if you're not sleeping, that's one of the biggest indicators. If you're not sleeping, and if you lose sleep for, let's say, 5-6 days at a row, then it leads to a chemical imbalance. And that chemical imbalance can result in these mood swings. That's how it's been in my experience. But there's a build-up. There's like a red flag. You can see when you're losing sleep or when you're getting excited or stressed or whatever those emotions are, and then you need to tackle those.
Hello. Aparna.
Yeah.
Sometimes people used to mock up just because of some physical or mental conditions. They don't understand how serious the problem is. Rather than they take it as an object of ridicule and they start laughing at you at some point of time. So how to deal with those kind of people?
Well, they're probably not your friends.
Sure.
So I think, but if you have to mingle with them, I think you would probably explain your condition to them. I think we live in a society where mental health is still not fully understood and people, are not very inclusive always. So I think it's important to just sit down and explain, and this is what happens. And it might sound like it's a formal thing to do, but I think it's some amount of explanation on your part is probably required. I don't know what people have said behind my back about me, but it really honestly doesn't bother me.
Hi Aparna. Aparna, have you in your journey ever felt that everything is fine now and I feel great, I have conquered all my battles and thought now I'm invincible? Because I think that's what happens with us even in the mental and the physical space. I might have a fever, I will take medication for mental health, I might look into spirituality, allies, all those things. But as soon as you bounce back, it's when you start feeling that I'm invincible, I'm all fine, I don't need anybody. So did that ever happen to you? And
yeah, I mean, it's been 4 years now that nothing has happened, but I still feel like just this, this book launch kind of showed me that, it's always possible to get excited and I need to be careful. Or in the past also, I've been 4 years and nothing has happened to me, and then again I've had an episode. So I think in this kind of, from my understanding, you have to kind of not take it for granted, not take the mental health for granted, because I know people who've been okay for like 6 years or 8 years or 14 years and then something has happened, right? But there's always the temptation to stop taking the meds. That's like a huge temptation, right? You think that, do I really require them? And so that's an ongoing kind of discussion with the doctors about whether to take them or not. So, yeah. Looks like we're good. It's just 3 o'clock, so that's good.
I have 2 last questions, if you don't mind. Yeah, so one of my subordinates has been disengaged lately. I feel that he has problems at his home that are reflecting at work. I want to help, but it's a little uncomfortable for me, and I'm not sure I'm the right person to do it. What should I do?
Well, is there someone else that could have that discussion if there is someone else who could have that discussion informally, if you trust them? That's one option. But I think that if they're directly reporting and you don't want to involve someone else, you don't want to involve, like, let's say HR into that process, because it becomes a formal process if you involve them, then you might want to just find a casual way to just talk about families or talk about family life and get them to open up, and not try and do it in like neutral territory, not call them to your cabin or call them to your space, find a place somewhere else in the campus or in the premises to have that conversation. So it becomes a little bit more casual.
Okay. Last question. Are there ways to keep a tab on my mental health outside of counseling?
Well, I think it's a good metric. I think it can, but I think that's where the conversations with self become really important. If you're prepared to like maintain a journal, I think that's a wonderful way of keeping tabs of your mental health, because you can go back, and writing always brings a lot of clarity and self-awareness, and you can really actually see how you're progressing over a period of time. So that's something that conversation with self is really important.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time today. I think it was a fairly illuminating speech. I'd also like to thank the entire crew over here, the support staff, Mrinali from our L&D team for sort of ceaselessly working behind the scenes to ensure that the talk was successful. So thank you, everybody. We have copies of Aparna's book to your left, which we'll be giving, and there are refreshments to your right. So thank you all, and thank you once again.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's really been a pleasure. Thank you.